the world's fastest bomber, the XB-70 Valkyrie. The United States Air Force Strategic Air Command's nuclear-armed deep-penetration supersonic strategic bomber, designated B-70, had the North American Aviation XB-70 Valkyrie as its prototype. The six-engine Valkyrie, developed by North American Aviation (NAA) in the late 1950s, could cruise at Mach 3 at 70,000 feet for thousands of miles. Because interceptor aircraft were the sole effective defense against bomber aircraft at the time, it was anticipated that the B-70 would be practically impervious to them at these speeds. Before the controllers could place their fighters in an ideal position for an interception, the bomber would fly out of the radar station's range after only a brief pass over it. Its great speed made it difficult to notice on radar displays, and no Soviet fighter or interceptor aircraft of the time could match its high altitude and high speed characteristics. Midway through the 1950s, hostilities between the US and the USSR were at an all-time high. To attack objectives deep within an enemy country, both sides had strategic bombers that could fly halfway around the world. The United States had created an all-jet bomber force that was state-of-the-art. In a full-scale confrontation, neither the recently introduced B-52 nor the soon-to-be-released B-58 would be very effective against Soviet air defense, despite their ability to transport enormous payloads over great distances. The B-52 could reach the Soviet Union, but it was too sluggish to compete with the newest generation of Soviet interceptors. Although the supersonic B-58 could fly as quickly as any interceptor, its payload had a restricted range. A new type of aircraft, a massive bomber that could outrun anything the Soviets could hurl at it, was what the Air Force desperately needed. But in 1955, a lot of people questioned whether such a plane was really feasible because it would need to use some very unconventional methods, similar to employing high-energy exotic fuels to improve the performance of jet engines or nuclear power to increase the range of airplanes. The most realistic answer appeared to be a plane that would travel most of the way to its destination below the speed of sound before ejecting its outer wings and fuel tanks to make a supersonic rush. However, aviation technology advanced quickly in the 1950s. A design that would glide supersonically for its entire mission might replace the conventional concept thanks to quick advancements in aerodynamics, engine performance, and exotic materials. Therefore, the Air Force started working on a new generation of bombers in 1957. Additionally, the performance goals were lofty. Leading aircraft manufacturers Boeing and North American Aviation were invited to compete on a design. It would need to fly more than 3 times faster than the B-52, 25,000 feet higher, and have comparable payload and range. The radical plans that Boeing and North American Aviation submitted initially appeared to be comparable. Both had canards and slender delta wings that were designed for supersonic flight, but it was widely believed that Boeing would prevail. After all, during the Second World War, they produced the venerable B-52 and several other famous bombers. It was North American Aviation who came in last. Their engineers, however, made a discovery during development that would offer them a significant advantage, a little-known study that described the compression lift phenomenon. Shockwaves normally move away from an aircraft as it exceeds the speed of sound, but if they could be directed beneath the wings, they would help produce more lift. The Air Force was impressed by North American Aviation's entry, which used this theory to promise to fly more effectively at high supersonic speeds, much to Boeing's surprise. The design from North American Aviation was chosen for development in 1957. The new bomber would be known as the B-70 and given the name Valkyrie. Modern engineering techniques were employed to create a 260-ton bomber that could outrun a fighter jet. 6 afterburning turbojets were supplied air through a sophisticated inlet to enable these feet for the engines to operate as effectively as possible at high supersonic speeds, and even if one of them failed, the Valkyrie would still be able to maintain Mach 3 and finish its mission. The Valkyrie, however, had one of the highest lift-to-drag ratios of any manned aircraft, variable geometry wings, improved stability, and increased compression lift, all thanks to sophisticated aerodynamics. At low supersonic speeds, they could be fully extended during takeoff and landing and angled downward 25 degrees. At multi-Mach speeds, they could be fully extended at a full 65 degrees. However, flying at 3 times the speed of sound would cause kinetic heating on the airframe to be so intense that it would soften conventional aircraft aluminum. To cool the interior of the airplane, engineers created innovative fuselage covering and fuel circulation systems. The Valkyrie's cockpit was fully pressurized and equipped with a cutting-edge enclosed escape system, even at a height of 75,000 feet. The four-person bomber crew would no longer need to put on cumbersome flight suits, allowing the Valkyrie crew to take off in only 20 minutes and deliver a nuclear payload anywhere in the world in a matter of hours. The Valkyrie gave an absolutely fantastic performance, and the bomber would represent America's deterrence by strength policy. In May 1964, the first experimental XB-70 prototype was displayed. It would soon be joined by a second and third prototype, both of which were already under construction, and flight testing would start in the months that followed. However, it was obvious from the beginning that things wouldn't go as planned. There were numerous technical issues during the initial ground tests. While engineers worked on a long list of problems, the initial flight was postponed for several months. The XB-70 wouldn't be prepared to take off for its first flight until September 21st. And as the space-age bomber took flight for the first time, there was applause. Celebrations, however, were short-lived, since one of the engines quickly surged, forcing a shutdown, and the landing gear was unable to retract due to a hydraulic leak. It seems that just as one issue was resolved, another would crop up as the prototype landed and a brake jammed, resulting in a tire blowing up and catching fire. The XB-70 initially broke over the sound barrier on October 12th, just exceeding Mach 1. However, as the flying tests went on, the paint started to come off the control surfaces in the fuselage, and soon the aircraft looked as though it had been through a sandblaster. The paint was repaired, and the XB-70 continued to reach higher speeds. But with each test flight, it seemed that the problems got worse the faster it flew. In the 12th flight, 4 engines were destroyed when the horizontal splitter detached as the prototype approached Mach 2.6 and was pulled into the engine duct. All of the engines had to be replaced, but the pilots made a safe landing. Finally, on October 14th, the plane was given the go-ahead to accelerate to Mach 3. However, only 2 minutes later, a significant portion of the leading edge of the wing broke off, necessitating yet another emergency landing. The initial prototype could only fly after that at a maximum speed of Mach 2.5.